Greetings, my most outstanding human friends, and welcome to Professional Photography Tips Question of the Week. My name is Josh Cripps, and you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Joshua Cripps Photography. This week's question comes to us from Mike Gervais, and it's an absolute beauty of a question. Mike writes, after seeing this image of yours online and listening to how you came to your settings, I got to thinking. In my line of work, which is carpentry and remodeling, there's a standard I always follow. Plumb, level, square. Use those and you can't go wrong. So that being said, are there familiar settings in ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed that generally work well? And yes, I realize the lighting and settings don't usually allow for a preset combination, but there has to be a favorite ISO, f-stop, shutter speed combo that generally works well to produce amazing images. Okay, so this is an amazing question. It kind of boils down to, is there a magic bullet in terms of camera settings in order to get good results? And the answer is no, because ambient light conditions are always changing, and so you need to adapt to that to make sure exposure is good. As things get darker, you'll need to open your aperture, extend your shutter speed, increase your ISO, all that kind of stuff. So there's no magic combination of settings per se. However, there is a way to know how to pick the right camera settings every single time you go out to shoot. And it's sort of a methodology, a systematic concept that I employ. And it basically revolves around creative priorities. So when you're going out to shoot, you shouldn't be thinking in terms of ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed. What you should be thinking of are what are the artistic effects that those settings create in your images. F-stop, for example, controls depth of field. That's the artistic effect of f-stop. Shutter speed controls the amount of motion you see, and that's often tied to different emotions within your photo. For example, short shutter speeds lead to dramatic effects, and long shutter speeds lead to soft and dreamy and relaxing kind of effects. And ISO doesn't really have a specific artistic effect unless you want to deliberately introduce noise into your photos. But that's an important consideration as well, because it does control noise, and the lower ISO you use, the more dynamic range you have. So instead of thinking f-stop, shutter speed, ISO, be thinking depth of field, motion, dynamic range, and noise. And you can put those in priority in order of what's most important to you in a specific scene. And that's going to let you pick the correct camera settings every single time. Let me give you an example. For me personally, depth of field is really important. I really like to have that front to back sharpness in my frame. So after I've set up my composition, I put my f-stop on the smallest possible f number that gives me the depth of field that I need. And the reason I use the smallest possible f number is twofold. One, generally speaking, lenses are sharper with smaller f numbers than they are at larger f numbers because of something called diffraction. And two, it gives me a little bit of room to play if I need to adjust my exposure. Next, I identify if anything is moving in the frame. If not, then my shutter speed is irrelevant. All I have to do is pick a shutter speed that gives me the best looking histogram for the exposure that I want. If something is moving, then I need to decide how I want to deal with that motion. Do I want a short shutter speed for drama or a longer shutter speed for a more relaxed feel? Of course, you also need to realize that the longer you make your shutter speed, the more likely you are to overexpose your image. And the shorter you make your shutter speed, the more likely you are to underexpose your image. So if I decide that I need a long shutter speed to capture the motion that I want to see in my photo, then I can either stop down my aperture or I can put some filters on the front of my lens in order to get that good exposure that I need. Now, if I pick a short shutter speed, which is gonna lead generally towards underexposure, I don't wanna open up my aperture because I've already picked the smallest f number to give me the depth of field that I need. If I make my f number even smaller, my depth of field is gonna go too shallow, and I'm gonna lose that sharpness from front to back in the frame. So here's where ISO enters the picture. If I need to pick a shorter shutter speed and still maintain depth of field, I'll boost my ISO in order to get the look that I want. So that's the thought process that you should be having every time you go out to shoot. Identify what are the most important artistic considerations and prioritize your settings to emphasize those things. If motion is the most important thing, then you should be picking a shutter speed that captures the motion that you want and play with your aperture and your ISO in order to get the right exposure. However, if depth of field is most important, then aperture, you need to pick the right f number to give you the depth of field and sharpness that you need, and you can play with shutter speed and ISO to get the right exposure. So that's my technique, that's my process, and how I pick the perfect camera settings every single time. So thanks a ton for that question, Mike. I hope that helped you guys a lot. As always, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see your question featured here on Question of the Week, be sure to submit it here. And you can also sign up for our newsletter for all kinds of photo tips and gear reviews, inspiring photos, and more. And if you're interested in the best in-depth photography and post-processing tutorials on the web, be sure to head over to the Nature Photography Academy. Until next time, have fun and happy shooting.